I was wrong about Tony Khan and I want to talk about it. So, yeah, let's do that. One of the things I've been mostly critical about AEW, more than creative decisions, more than booking decisions, more than anything in the last 6 years was Tony Khan. And it's not that I wouldn't disrespect Tony Khan in my videos or anything like that, but I largely thought, or I mostly thought, that Tony Khan didn't know how to necessarily handle himself when it came to public appearances and interviews. So much so that it would then turn into us questioning business decisions that Tony Khan has made. And I have said for years, Tony Khan needs to be media trained. Tony Khan is a challenger brand. And I think the idea of really trying to be this anti-WWE product and everything against WWE and competition and the tribalism, I have personally come out and said several times, I think that's the wrong choice. And the reason why I would say that so often in the last 6 years was because, and we could find the footage, by the way. We can go back 6 years ago and find my early AEW content where I was an extremely massive fan of this company when I was going to all of their events and things of that nature. I would say, listen, they're doing something great at a time where WWE is outright poor. WWE is outright terrible, right? But the thing is, when you are a challenger brand, you don't need to start this whole thing where you get your sickos behind you trying to target WWE, because quite frankly, it's not actually doing anything to hurt WWE. I don't believe that. I've never believed that. And I would always say, you got to be careful how much shit talking and trolling and things that you're doing on social media. You got to be careful how much you do it, because of the fact that eventually when things go wrong, people are going to see through it. And people are not going to agree with it. And I don't know if it was Tony Khan initially, him who did it. Obviously, Cody Rhodes was a very big part of that, initially with AEW and the tribalism. But I felt like Tony Khan definitely loved the idea of being petty towards WWE. In fact, I actually said this quite often, where I would make the argument, hey, WWE could sit here and counter program. WWE could try to minimalize AEW. But the minute that WWE completely fails or something goes wrong or there's a PR nightmare, WWE will be the ones that will look stupid. And in the end, WWE will hurt WWE more than anything. Because if you're the number one company and you're doing everything to delegitimize your competition, and then you yourself struggles and publicly people are not happy with your product, then eventually it will get the fan base to turn. So I always felt like Tony Khan's involvement in the back and forth, especially on Twitter, interviews, things like that, I always thought it was very uncalled for. And the thing is, sometimes you just have to be the better person. Sometimes you have to be the bigger person. It's not that Tony Khan owes it to anybody, but sometimes it's about playing the long game. And I always said this years ago, if Tony Khan is patient, if Tony Khan focuses only on AEW and not WWE, people will eventually just come to gravitate to AEW naturally, because WWE's business and their greed and stuff like that will be a turnoff. Now, 6 years later, you're starting to see the result of that, where WWE has a very big reputation of being a greedy company under TKO. And in a way, it drives people away because the ticket prices are pricing out fans and the hardcore audience no longer has access to it. You have to have so many different streaming services to watch, things of that nature. But the truth is, I always knew at some point Tony Khan would get his act together, publicly speaking, like when doing interviews and stuff. And today he was on the Ariel Helwani show, and it was a perfect example of how an interview should be done. Tony Khan was transparent. Tony Khan was incredibly smart to talk about certain topics that maybe in the past he would have strayed away from. For example, talking about Chris Jericho, talking about CM Punk, talking about Britt Baker, talking about Andrade. Maybe there's a few things that he can't really get into in depth because of legal reasons, and that's completely fine. But Tony Khan was transparent in this entire interview. Tony Khan was very understanding when he was asked about, WWE and TNA working together. Is it a thing to hurt AEW or counter programming? This is the first time I've ever heard Tony Khan do an interview where I genuinely felt like this guy is actually focused on AEW. 100% through and through. Like, to me, it felt like Tony Khan is actually focused on AEW and not WWE. It doesn't seem like this guy has bad blood with how competition works. The problem for Tony Khan is that these AEW sickos tend to be anti-WWE everything, and they think it helps AEW's cause, but realistically it doesn't, because that behavior, when somebody criticizes AEW, and whether or not in your heart you believe it's grifting or engagement baiting or whatever the fuck you want to call it, it doesn't matter. The truth is, you're driving away fans from the product, because some people, like myself, we're very hardcore AEW fans. And there's other people and other celebrities who have wanted to be fans of AEW, but if they ask a question or don't know who somebody is, they're met with backlash in the comments or in the tweets, and it's like, it pushes people away. Nobody wants to engage with a community that's toxic like that. And I'm not discrediting WWE's toxic fan base too, because they also have a toxic fan base, and that surely, like, definitely is a real thing. But you don't see Triple H or WWE necessarily feeding into that. And I think for a very long time, AEW has had this association, whether it's their talent or Tony Khan, people feeding into it. And then that drives the tribalism a lot more crazier. So when I say that I was wrong about Tony Khan, the truth is I was right, that at some point he would get back to where he should be, which is, hey, sound more humble, sound more like a human being, don't hide away from certain things, address things head on. Going on TV, calling WWE the Harvey Weinstein of professional wrestling, no matter what, if people agree, disagree, this, that, the third, people look at it as like, hey, you're just saying these things so you can try to, get people talking about your product. It's different, in today's day and age. I feel like the best thing for professional wrestling companies to do is to focus on themselves. Some people like the tribalism. Some people love that. They love when Tony Khan's talking shit about WWE. But if your product is not beating WWE, you're failing. You don't need to be on WWE's level. You could be successful without being on WWE's level. And with all of the tactics that WWE is pulling out to try to prevent AEW's growth, AEW will be fine. They have a billionaire who's invested. So realistically, all it takes is for WWE to keep being petty and keep saying dumb things and doing dumb things. And then eventually people are going to fall out of love with their product and then be like, okay, you're clearly focused on stopping another company's growth, that you're not even focused on your own company's growth. So what I personally felt with this Ariel Helwani interview was that this was excellent. This was excellent. Like, the way he was talking about all of this talent, addressing Ricky and Jade and everybody having a picture, dude, shout out to Tony Khan. Like, you actually killed this. This was the first interview I think you've ever done where like people could literally sit there and say, wow, that was actually really good. He didn't sound like a challenging brand for WWE to challenge them and go up against them. What he sounded like was a confident promoter that said, listen, I truly believe in my brand and my product. And maybe my product is not for everyone, but I truly believe that we are the best. Instead of saying, hey, WWE sucks, we're better, this was a way better approach. I honestly thought this was amazing. I was wrong about Tony Khan. I've always wanted AEW to do well, and I don't think AEW has the best product right now. I don't. I really don't, and I'm not going to lie about that. I'm not going to act like that's true. But when I see Tony Khan doing interviews like this, to me, it makes me respect him a little bit more, because it tells me he's actually focused on making AEW a good product. And his product is not for everybody, and that's fine. WWE's product is not for everybody. But for what I personally enjoy, I would like to see AEW get back to the top where they belong, by my standards, because obviously I'm the customer. So we'll see what it all turns out to be. But shout out to Tony Khan. I thought this was really excellent. And, as much as I was wrong about Tony Khan, it's okay, because I think everybody was kind of waiting for Tony Khan to kind of change ways, and that's what he did. And I think he deserves credit for that. So there's a lot of praise for Tony Khan here. That interview was excellent. Not hiding from bullshit. That's what it needs to be. And if he keeps doing this, and I think maybe he'll even become a very big fan favorite for people on the opposing side, which would be very helpful to AEW.